There is so much that goes into a Disney World vacation planning process, and it can be pretty overwhelming at times. And that's why in this live stream tonight, I wanted to come on and share with you guys some things that you should think about and consider whenever it comes to planning a Disney World trip or vacation. I frequently visit the Disney World theme parks, and I know if I were to be planning a trip for myself, these are some things that I would want to consider and have in the back of my mind whenever I am planning my trip. So I want to thank you guys for being here in the live stream today. If it's your first time here, welcome to the Megan Moose channel. I love sharing Disney tips and tricks videos. I frequently visit the Disney parks and I love sharing my Disney tips. So tonight, as I said, we're going to talk about tips and tricks whenever it comes to planning a Disney World vacation and things that you should think about. But before we hop into the live stream, I first wanted to say, if you are here watching on the live stream, I wanted to say, put in the chat if you're watching. I'd love to see who all is here and let me know where you're watching from, what you're doing tonight. And also, if you're wanting to watch on the replay or if you can't watch the whole live stream tonight, there will be the live stream here will be on the channel that you can go and rewatch the live stream. And I'm also going to put little chapters on the bottom so that way if there's a particular topic you wanted to go back to or thing to look at again, you can easily go and click through and find that. So thank you again so much, guys, for being here. I see Surfer Girl is here. Hello, thanks for being here, Surfer Girl. So I'm very excited to share some of these tips with you guys. So I have 10 things here that I want to share with you guys. And as I mentioned, there's so much that goes into planning a Disney World trip. So this is going to be a very broad live stream. And then maybe in later live streams, I'll share and we'll go into more detail about some of these different topics that we'll be talking about. Francisco, hello. Watching from South California. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So we'll go ahead and hop right into the live stream. And I did want to say too, if you guys have any questions about planning a Disney World trip or any questions that maybe you watched another video and you have questions about something, feel free to put it in the chat and I'd love to help as best I can, or maybe somebody in the comments can help. So the first thing that you should think about whenever it comes to planning a Disney World vacation is your budget. And honestly, this is the thing that is going to determine the rest of your trip and what you can do on your trip. So the first thing you want to think about is how much money you have to actually go on your trip. At times, it can be really intimidating looking at how much the costs are to go to Disney World, and you can get really overwhelmed. But I still feel that there are ways that you can do Disney on a budget. You can either have a more expensive or a less expensive trip. So the first thing you want to think about is how much money you're going to have to spend to go on this vacation. And another thing that I want to talk about whenever it comes to budget is I do recommend saving some money in a little fund so that way you have some money for some sneaky costs that might catch up onto you that you might not necessarily know about. And I want to share some of those little sneaky costs that you might not think about. The first thing is parking. Whenever you are maybe staying at a Disney World resort, or if you are driving to the parks, you will have to pay for parking. So that's one thing that you want to kind of have in mind. You may already be spending money on your hotel, but whenever it comes to parking there, that's an extra cost that you might have. Another thing is souvenirs. Souvenirs can really add up whenever it comes to visiting Disney World. I know everybody wants to get their Disney merch, their Minnie Mouse ears, but have an idea before you go on your Disney World trip to know how much money you are actually wanting to spend on souvenirs and have a little budget with that. Going along with that, the second thing you want to think about is how long do you want your trip to be? Is it going to be a week-long trip? Do you want to be there for 2 weeks? I know some friends that have stayed for an extended time. Or is this just a weekend trip that you just want to get a quick little fill of Disney? To decide how long you actually want to spend at Disney World, and that'll give you a good idea for the rest of the things that we're going to be talking about here in the live stream. So have an idea of your budget, how long you want to stay. And then the third thing you'll want to think about is how many park days do you want to have whenever you're visiting Disney World? Of course, when visiting Disney World, the most popular thing to do, the reason why you might be going is to visit the theme parks. Disney World, as you may know, has 4 theme parks. They have Magic Kingdom, Hollywood Studios, Epcot, and Animal Kingdom. And there's so much to see and do in each of the parks. So if you're having a week-long trip, are you wanting to go to the parks every day? Are you wanting to have some off days spread in between there? Think about what you're wanting to do on your trip and how many park days you're wanting to have whenever you're actually going. I wanted to stop and see the comment here. Your friend told you to buy Disney gift cards and put them aside for several months to plan. That's actually a really good idea too, Surfer Girl, and that's something that I didn't necessarily talk about in here, but I have on other videos, I have heard a lot of people use Disney gift cards when they go to the grocery store. They'll buy a gift card and just have them to set aside. That's another really great way to budget, to kind of save up for your Disney trip. So that's definitely a good idea. I know some other people too that you can actually use Disney gift cards to your advantage. If you go to a store, so to speak, and you get like fuel perks, you can get some money off of gas. Or for Target, I know if you have the Target Red card, I think you can get like 5% back or something like that. So there is some ways that you can actually use, like, using gift cards to your advantage. So that's actually a really good tip that I'm glad that you shared here. That is very beneficial. So that's another thing that you can think about, is kind of get a little bit creative whenever it comes to planning your trip. So we talked about how many park days you want to have whenever you're in the park. So think about that. So that there's a couple of things that I want to tell you about whenever it comes to actually planning days in the park. So as you may or may not know, at Disney World now, you not only have to have a park ticket to get into the parks, but you have to have a reservation in order to get into the parks. So every park guest has to make a reservation for the park that they are wanting to visit. So say I wanted to visit Magic Kingdom tomorrow, I have to have a reservation in order to get into Magic Kingdom. And depending on the time of year that you're visiting or the day that you're visiting, it can be pretty busy to get into the parks, and sometimes these reservations do book up. So it's important, if you are knowing when you want to visit the parks, or if you have your tickets already purchased and have your trip already pre-planned or something, have those reservations made as soon as possible, because the last thing that you would want, and I talk about a lot here on my channel, but it's just because I don't want it to happen to anybody, because I know it has happened, is that guests get to the parks and they're ready to go into the parks and they find out they actually can't visit because there's no more reservations made and they don't have a reservation. So that's one thing that I want to drive home here on my channel, is to make park reservations. That way you can absolutely get into the parks. And then another thing whenever it comes to visiting the parks is figure out, depending on how long you're staying, if you want to use park hopper tickets or if you want to get single park day tickets. So a single park day ticket means that you can only visit one park a day, but if you have a park hopper ticket, you can hop around to the different Disney theme parks. What I recommend, if it's your first time visiting or if you have a longer stay at Disney World, I don't think you necessarily need to get a park hopper ticket, because there's so much that you can see and do in each of the theme parks. It can be pretty overwhelming and time consuming to hop from the different parks. So if you're able to just stay in one of the parks, it can really help you to maximize your time in that park and experience as much as you can while you're there. But say you were visiting for a weekend and you didn't have a ton of time, but you were wanting to try to get to all the parks or do multiple things, that's an instance where you may want to do the park hopper tickets. The park hopper tickets are a little bit more expensive than the single park day tickets. So if that's something you need to work into your budget, that's another thing to think about. So we've talked about the parks, talked about budgeting, but another important thing is, where are you going to stay whenever you are visiting Disney World? That is a huge thing. You want to make sure that you have a place to stay whenever you're visiting here, and you have a couple of options whenever it comes to that. There are a ton of Disney resorts that they have on Disney World property that you can stay at. There's some fancier resorts and then some family style resorts that you can stay at that maybe aren't as expensive. There's definitely pros and cons to staying on Disney property. And another thing you can do is stay off Disney property at a different hotel. But whenever it comes to staying on property, it is very nice too, because they have Disney transportation. They have a lot of great amenities at the resorts that you can stay at. But it is a little bit more expensive. If you stay off property, you might not have to spend as much on a room. So that's something that you'll want to think about whenever it comes to staying on property or off property. The on-property guests do have some perks as well. You can get into the parks, I think it's a half hour earlier than regular park guests. So it's just something that you'll want to think about whenever it comes to where you want to stay when you're at Disney World. Another thing whenever it comes to getting a place to stay at Disney World is definitely check the availability of all of the resorts or where you are wanting to stay at. We are in the middle of spring break right now, and it has been crazy at Disney World. And I've seen on a couple of videos that it actually is completely booked up to get a place to stay at Disney World. So if you're wanting to stay on Disney property, it's very hard to get a resort stay right now. So staying off property might be the only option that you have. So if you know when you're wanting to stay or have an idea about it, check that availability. There may be a resort that you're really wanting to stay at as well. So you want to make sure that if you want to stay at that resort, that it's available and that you can book it as soon as possible. So Surfer Girl saying, wish you could stay on property. Oh, bring it, but it's too expensive. That's the one. Yeah, I love Disney World. I love the Disney resorts. They're so cool. One that I would really like to stay at is Art of Animation. I just think it's a really fun resort. So maybe one day, but that is the thing. It is pretty expensive, so that's something that could definitely eat up a lot of your Disney budget. But another thing too is if you aren't wanting to stay at a hotel or if you're wanting to find a more homey place, Airbnb is a great option too, that you can find something that's around Disney World. If you have a car or if you can Uber or something like that, that you could stay, it's another option that you could have. We have a nice dog friendly hotel. Oh, interesting. And they don't charge. That's okay. That's another thing. So we talked about paying for parking. There are some other hotels around Disney World that don't pay for parking. I know this is not necessarily Disney related, but we stayed at a Drury Inn near the Universal resort, and we didn't have to pay for parking there. So that is another thing. And sometimes it comes with breakfasts or like meals. So you could get a little bit creative there and save some money if you're staying at an off-property hotel, because maybe you don't have to pay for parking. You could get a free breakfast. So that's definitely something to think about. And it's nice whenever you have those hotels and those places that you know are really nice that you like to stay at, because then you can definitely keep going back there. And so moving on from there, so we talked about where to stay. The next thing that maybe we're going a little out of order, but you'll want to know and think about, how are you going to get to Disney World? So you can think about driving to Disney World, you could fly to Disney World, and there's definitely pros and cons to both of those. If you are driving to Disney World, it's nice because you have your own car, you can drive around Disney property, but you do have to think about that parking that you'll have to pay for if you're staying at a resort. But even if you're staying off property, if you're wanting to park at the parks, there is parking at the parks that you'll have to pay for. So it's just something else that you'll have to take into consideration. But if you are flying to Disney World, they no longer have the Magical Express that used to be a free shuttle that took you from the Orlando airport to Disney World. And they no longer have that. They have a different shuttle service that you have to pay per person, I believe. So these are all just things you'll have to think about whenever it comes to planning a Disney trip and your Disney budget. So like I said, there's pros and cons to that if you want to fly or drive. So it's just something to think about whenever you're thinking about planning a trip. And then another thing we talked about, what days you were wanting to go to the parks or how many days you might want to visit the parks. But another thing you'll want to think about is if you're wanting to have any off days from the parks. So as much as I love Disney World, it is very exhausting to go. You might be running around the parks. It's hot here in Florida. There's so much to see and do. You can get very tired. And so some days it is nice to have an off day whenever it comes to going to Disney World. If I were making a trip to Disney World, I think I would definitely have a budget off day in there. So that way I can just have a day to recoup and also take advantage of the amenities that I have at the resort. One thing I see is that people spend a lot of money going to Disney World and staying at these Disney resorts, and they're so fun to stay at. There's so many things to take advantage of, but they're busy at the parks that they might not be able to even take advantage of what's going on at their hotel or at their resort. So have a budget off day in there if your time frame for being at Disney World allows for it, because you can recoup a little bit and you can also spend some time and just take some time off from going to the parks. There's actually a lot of things that you can do at Disney World. I have a separate video here that I talk about it that doesn't really require a park ticket. So you can, of course, have a pool day. You can visit Disney Springs. If you haven't heard of Disney Springs, it's essentially the shopping area of Disney World. It's free. They have free parking that you can park at. And there's so much to see and do there too. There's some Disney stores, there's restaurants, there's stores that aren't necessarily affiliated with Disney. And so there's so much to see and do that you can do at Disney Springs or just on Disney property that doesn't require a park ticket that you can do on an off day. You can go resort hopping. You've probably heard me talk a lot about that here on my channel. I love resort hopping at Disney World. It's just a way that you can hop around the different Disney World resorts. And it's just a fun little thing to do in a day in itself, because all of the resorts are different in their own way and they offer something different. They have fun gift shops that you can go and get merch that maybe is just at the hotels there, or you could go and see the pools that they have, or just how all the decor that they have. So you could go resort hopping, or they have mini golf on Disney property. You could go have a mini golfing day. So there's so much that you can do if you have an off day at Disney World. So think about that if you are planning a trip and have more time and maybe want to have an off day here and there. I know I said this earlier, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat here. And Surfer Girl, you were saying resort hopping is so much fun and free. Yes, yes. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Is watch the fireworks. Okay, yeah. So that I'm glad you said that, Surfer Girl. So yeah, resort hopping is free. You can use Disney transportation to do resort hopping. I absolutely love it. I have a separate video here if you're curious about how Disney transportation works. But that is the really fun thing about it, is that it's completely free. You can hop around, go to the different restaurants, and yeah, some of the different places you can go and actually have a good view of some of the fireworks shows of the evening shows that are happening in the park. So at the Polynesian, that's a great view to see the enchantment fireworks from Magic Kingdom. You can go to the Caribbean Beach Resort and watch Epcot's Harmonious show. So there is a lot of things that you can do whenever it comes to resort hopping. And yes, it's completely free. So it's really fun. And you could even think about making a dining reservation at one of the resorts that you are going to. So you could make a day out of it or just kind of snack around the different resorts. So that is a really fun option to do. That's one thing that I love to do whenever I'm not necessarily going to the parks. And okay, on your birthday, went to oh, okay, I have not seen that yet. It's free. Yeah. So they do have entertainment too at the resort. I'm glad you're bringing all this up, Surfer Girl. So they do have entertainment at the resorts too, which is really fun to go and see. I know I've seen some characters there before. So yeah, just definitely look into it too. Do some research ahead of time and see like what the different resorts offer. So that way you have an idea of maybe what you want to go see and do. But there's a lot that you can do whenever it comes to resort hopping or just an off day whenever you are at the parks or at Disney World. Okay, so we talked about days off from the parks, things that you can do. Now you'll want to think about, and we talked a little bit about it, but how to get to the parks or just how to get around Disney property in general. So Disney World is so big. If you've never been to Disney World before, I recommend just looking at a map and just seeing where everything is located. The parks are very spread out. The resorts are everywhere. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but Disney transportation is very handy and it can help you to get all around Disney property and to exactly where you need to go. I had a comment before, somebody asked, if you aren't staying on Disney property, are you able to just is it free to use the Disney transportation? And it is, which is very nice and very convenient. You may have to park at some of the resorts if you are wanting to use Disney transportation, or you could park at Disney Springs and use a bus to go to wherever you're planning on going. But they have Disney buses. There's the monorail, the Skyliner. There's water taxis. You can use an Uber or a Lyft to get around Disney property. So there's so many ways that you can get around Disney World. And it can be very intimidating and kind of confusing to figure out how to use Disney transportation. Like I said, I have a video here, but I recommend kind of familiarizing yourself with the system beforehand. If you have a game plan and an idea of what you're going to be doing for your day, or you're trying to think about how to get to and from different places, I definitely recommend looking up Disney transportation, just having an idea of how it works. Some of the buses or the water taxis run on different schedules, so you want to make sure that you're able to use your time the most efficiently, so that way you don't have to really wait on Disney transportation. Gretchen here saying, I love resort hopping in Disney Springs. Both are my favorite. Disney Springs is such a fun option too. As I mentioned, there's fun restaurants and shopping that you can do. I know when my family comes down, I love taking them resort hopping. A really fun resort to go resort hopping to that's great for kids, great for adults, is the Art of Animation Resort. It's really fun because they have lots of large Disney characters there that you can see. I know kids would really love it. They have a Cars Land, Little Mermaid, Finding Nemo, and a Lion King area of the resort. And you can use the Skyliner for free to get around to see that. And then Disney Springs is just fun because there's a lot of fun restaurants and dessert places that you can go to. My family and I love going to the Ghirardelli factory and getting a sundae. So much that you can do with that. And yes, I absolutely love resort hopping in Disney Springs. Okay, so let's see. You parked at Disney Springs for your park hopping day. It was nice. Oh, and so nice to take the boat. Yes. So that, yeah, parking at Disney Springs is very helpful too. And then that's like just a nice little like central hub, and they have the buses, and then yeah, they have the boats to go around. So that is definitely something that is really helpful and beneficial whenever it comes to doing park hopping or resort hopping. So let's see here. Okay, so we talked about how to get around the parks, how to get around Disney property. I think I mentioned too, you can use Ubers and Lyfts too personally. The Disney transportation can get backed up, or sometimes it can be a little unreliable, or there can be lines at the beginning of the days. So maybe you want to be a little bit more flexible with your time and use your own Uber or Lyft. I did see a notification that the minivans are coming back soon to Disney World. It is a separate Uber, I think it's a Lyft affiliated service that they have through Disney World. So that is coming back soon as an option to get around Disney World. So just familiarize yourself with the transportation and everything, because that's a huge part, as we've been talking about a lot. That's a lot of a very beneficial thing to know whenever you're going on your trip. And then we talked a little bit about it, but you want to know where you want to eat. So there are not only a lot of parks and resorts and shopping, but there's a lot of places that you can eat whenever you're at Disney World. And a lot of people you'll see at Disney World, it says like here for the snacks on their shirts. There's a lot of things that you can do whenever it comes to eating at Disney World. But one thing that I recommend whenever you are thinking about planning a trip or know what you might want to be doing is to make dining reservations. So if you're wanting to have a fancy sit down dinner, or just a sit down dinner in general, or lunch or breakfast, I recommend making dining reservations before actually going on your trip, because that can be very beneficial and it can save you time. As I mentioned, we're in spring break right now and it's very busy. You can have long lines whenever it comes to going and getting food. And so to maximize your time and to ensure that you're able to go and sit down and get a meal, I recommend making dining reservations so that way you can absolutely get into a restaurant. And there may be an experience in a restaurant that you are absolutely wanting to check out. And so I recommend making those dining reservations ahead of time. Things can book up pretty quickly. There are some very popular options at Disney World. There's like the Be Our Guest restaurant. There's the California Grill that we've been to that's on top of the Contemporary. There's very popular things that if you are wanting to check it out, definitely make dining reservations as soon as possible, so that way you can absolutely get there. Because I like to say being hangry at Disney World is no joke. And so you want to make sure that you're able to get the food that you need or dine where you want to go. So definitely think about making dining reservations whenever it comes to eating at Disney World. Another thing that I personally like to do whenever I go to Disney World is I like bringing my own food. If I were planning my own trip or going on a Disney vacation, I absolutely would have groceries delivered to my resort. It's nice because some of the Disney hotels or Disney resorts have maybe their own kitchen if you have a larger room, but a lot of them have their own refrigerator. And so it's nice having some snacks or just some food delivered to your hotel. It can help you to save some money, but also have some snacks on hand whenever you are at the parks or doing a resort hopping day or just walking around in general, or just a snack before bed. But I recommend having snacks on hand or just having groceries delivered is a very beneficial thing. You can use Instacart. I think there's Amazon Fresh is a thing that I've seen recently. And so think about looking about what your options are whenever it comes to that. You can have groceries delivered to your resort or your hotel, or you could drive and get your own groceries or bring your own groceries. So definitely think about that whenever you are visiting the parks. It's something that is very beneficial. I like bringing stuff with me whenever I go to the parks and just having it on hand, so that way I don't have to pay for anything whenever I'm at the parks and I can just keep enjoying my day. Another thing, whenever you are in the parks, there are quick service stops that you can stay at or eat at. And we'll talk about it later on here in the stream, but you can do mobile ordering whenever you are in the parks. So that means on your phone, on the My Disney Experience app, you can order your food, you can purchase it, and the app will alert you whenever your food is ready, so that way you can go and just pick it up. This is a very beneficial thing to do. I think a lot of the places in the parks require you to do the mobile ordering, but there's some places that you can still walk up to the counter. But I find it very beneficial to do this mobile ordering because it saves time and it's a lot less stressful because you don't have to wait in the long lines for getting food. And like I said, we don't want to mess around with being hangry at Disney World. So it's a very quick way to go ahead and get food whenever you're at Disney. There are different time slots that you can say that when you want to go pick up your food. This can be beneficial too if you're waiting in a long line and you know about when you are going to be getting out of the line for the ride. You can already have your mobile order ready. You can say, I'm here, like prepare my order, and then they'll prepare it, and then you can go ahead and get it and eat it and then keep going about your day. So it's just a nice way to keep your day efficient, so that way you can keep going about your Disney day. So that's another really beneficial thing. And then another thing that you want to think about is how to pack for Disney World. This is a huge question. I see a ton of people ask about it, and there is a lot that goes into packing for Disney World, but I think it's a very important thing. There's some things that you'll want to think about whenever it comes to packing for Disney World. First thing I want to talk about here is the Florida weather. Disney World is located in Florida, and Florida weather can be pretty unpredictable. It can be pretty crazy at times. And so you absolutely want to be prepared for the weather here in Florida. If you're visiting during the summertime, it is very hot, but it also can be crazy rainy. There can be crazy rainstorms that pop up. I know we've already gotten some crazy weather here in Florida, already entering into the spring here, and we are not even in summer yet. But another thing that you want to think about whenever visiting in the winter time or the fall time, we all talk about the Florida summer and how warm it is here in Florida, but it actually can get pretty chilly here in Florida as well. So during the fall and the winter seasons, it's very nice to bring layers because it can be very cold in the evening. And then maybe during the day, it might be a little bit sunny. You could take a layer off. And this will save you from having to go into the stores at Disney World and spending a lot of money on a jacket or on a long sleeve shirt. So you definitely want to be prepared whenever it comes to the clothing that you pack for Disney World. The other thing that I always talk about here are the shoes that you bring to Disney World. It is very important to bring comfortable shoes. You want to make sure that you're bringing multiple pairs of shoes and shoes that are also kind of water resistant or that are able to dry pretty quickly because, as I mentioned, it rains. You may go on a water ride. And bring those multiple pairs of shoes so that way if a pair does get wet, you don't have to just stick to that one pair, or if you find out a pair is not very comfy, you have a pair to fall back on. So I highly recommend those things. There also may be some essentials that you want to bring to Disney World with you. I always bring a backpack with me. I bring a Loungefly or just a fanny pack at times if I'm going for a half day, but you'll want to bring a bottle of water. You absolutely will want to bring a portable charger. You do so much on your phone at Disney World. You may be taking pictures. You'll be going on different apps to maybe post on social media or use the My Disney Experience app. So you want to make sure that you have a portable charger so that way your device is charged for the whole day. You'll want to have your wallet, your magic band, all of those things. You want to make sure that those are packed. And another thing that I recommend whenever you are going to the parks is the night before you are going, have everything set out the night before. So that way you don't worry about losing or forgetting anything whenever you get to the parks. The last thing you would want is to have to go back to your resort because Disney transportation can take a while to get to and from the parks. So you want to make sure that you have everything whenever it comes to going to the parks. And the last thing I talked about here was the My Disney Experience app. So this is something I talk about here a lot on my channel too, and it's only because it's a very beneficial thing to take advantage of whenever you're actually at Disney World. I love the My Disney Experience app. You can do mobile ordering on there. You can do mobile checkout. You can mobile check in to your resort that you're staying at. You can look at wait times, and it's just a very beneficial thing to have. And so I recommend downloading that before you are actually at Disney World, figuring out how the app works, kind of familiarize yourself with it so that way you know what all features are there on the app. And then, so that is definitely a very beneficial thing to have that I like to use. Another thing on the My Disney Experience app is the Disney Genie Plus service that you maybe have heard about. So just kind of familiarize yourself with that and know how that works ahead of time because it can be very beneficial to use if you're wanting to use that. So those are the 10 things that I wanted to share with you about what goes into planning a Disney trip. And if you are planning a Disney trip, what you should think about. I hope you guys found this stream helpful and beneficial. I've got a bunch of other videos here on the channel that talk about planning a trip to Disney World. I've got Disney trips and tricks videos that you can check out after this. And thank you guys very much for watching. If you're watching on the replay, I appreciate it. And we'll see you guys in another stream coming up. And I hope you guys have a great trip and trip planning whenever it comes to going to Disney World. See you guys.